Dun, dun, dun.
We will start. Welcome. Thank you all for coming. So this is an event put on by the Needham Housing Coalition. We are a group of residents in Needham who care about having more housing choice in Needham, different kinds of housing, different kinds of different price points. And I'd like us to be able to introduce ourselves. People will hear from the coalition. I'm Paula Dickerman. Sir.
Oscar Words.
Well, that's us, and a wonderful support person from Citizens Housing and Planning Association.
Hello, good to meet you guys. I'm Sade Ratliff. Good to meet you.
And from Abundant Housing Massachusetts, another partner.
Hi, I'm Julia.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So our objective this evening is to share information about ADUs in Needham. And most of this, accessory dwelling units, and most of this we plan to have be a Q&A. So this is an opportunity for you to ask questions, and people will answer those questions as best we can. Our agenda, as you know where we're going, is welcome. We did that. Hello. We will soon introduce our contributors. We will explain why we're doing this. Actually, we're going to do that first. Explain how this came to be, why we're doing this meeting. Then we'll introduce folks. We're going to do a very high-level review of the current law, and then leave the details for you guys to ask about. We're going to share a lot of information about ADUs that have already been built in Needham. That might be very helpful to see what kinds of things have already happened. We've prepared a checklist kind of thing for folks with resources on it that you can all take home with you or you can find online.
Paula, could you use the mic for me, please? Thank you.
Except that I'm done. And then we'll open it up to Q&A. So our first thing, as I said, to talk about why we're here. So CC Ganaconto is going to tell you. Yeah.
Yay.
Good evening, everybody.
Good
I am
evening.
CC Ganaconto. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
And my husband, George, and I have lived in Needham for 30 plus years. I'd like to thank Oscar and the Needham Housing Coalition for arranging to have this much needed informative panel discussion on ADUs. Thank you to the panelists too for being here to answer some questions. I would like to be upfront and share my disclaimer that everything I share tonight comes from my and my husband's personal experiences and comes with its own biases and points of view. I do tend to be slightly opinionated. One short digression. I personally find the term ADU, assisted dwelling unit, really confusing. And I really appreciate the former term, which was in-law apartment, as it somehow connotes inclusivity and warmth. So a brief history of our journey with the ADUs started right before the pandemic when ADUs were first being discussed. And my personal concern was that came from a diversity standpoint because we felt that limiting who could live in an ADU would inadvertently favor one racial demographic over others. We were also concerned, having worked with seniors a lot of my life, that using the term caregiver for really proud and independent New England seniors would be a barrier. And the definition for family seemed rather narrow since many of us live in blended families. At that time, my husband thought, oh, what a great way for seniors to be able to age in place, as they could possibly have access to supplemental rental income. But at that time, rental was not an option. But that is all in the past. There was a lot of hard work done by so many to get us to where we are today, and we are grateful for the listening and the adjusting that people had to do to get us to where we are. So thank you to those who were involved. First, fast forward to the present. Here we are in Needham 2024 with the ability to have a by right attached in-law ADU that can be rented, but does need to meet certain building town requirements. This is really exciting for all of us. We, George and I, personally see the approval of ADUs as one of many ways to meet some personal, social, and community needs. In our opinion, we see this type of household as opening up options for intergenerational living, increasing and diversifying rental housing stock, providing rental income for seniors to age in place, and opportunities for greener living. A recent Washington Post article by Michael J. Corn shares several generations living under one roof would help ease the housing crunch and the loneliness epidemic. It would also cut global warming emissions. Denser living is almost always greener, fewer homes, less energy, and more efficiency overall. One emotion I noticed throughout this process is that change can trigger fear. I can relate to fear of change and the idea of changing lanes. So I'm grateful that so many of you came in person and are on Zoom to learn more. I'm dating myself, but I really love the Sims tagline, an educated customer is our best consumer. I wish us all open minds and hearts as we embark on a journey of learning about ADUs, how it can enhance our personal lives, help alleviate housing shortages, offer Needham employees opportunities to live where they work, support green living, cultivate a culture of Needham inclusivity, and more, and also to understand what change can bring, both the positives and to address our concerns. And on that note, I am passing the baton to those who have a solid, comprehensive knowledge and provide us with all the more in-depth information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cece, our fearless leader. There was a conversation a few months ago that got this all going, saying thank you for getting that going. You see in front of you a bunch of people who have been very gracious to share some time. And I think we'll probably let them speak more in terms of their experiences and respond to Q&A and have some observations, I'm sure, from various members of this group. And you can see this sort of sampling of backgrounds that we thought would be helpful for everyone, both here in person and on Zoom, to be able to ask some important questions, things that you're kind of trying to find more information about. We will also get into a little bit more of the detail of where the bylaw was, where it is now, and then the process for moving forward and what is lying ahead for the town, which Paula will talk about. I think what Daphne, who was part of the early regime with the special permit process for ADUs, and Andrew and Romeo took advantage of it, let's say, in building an ADU. At that time, I think we all know that there were restrictions that CC spoke eloquently about that may now disappear because we can rent them. And so there really doesn't need to be restrictions, which is huge for us to have more opportunity to do them. George, I know, has had experience with doing ADUs under the special permit, and I think you're going to have some thoughts about what lies ahead. Ned has been involved in the real estate industry and has been gracious to come and share some of his thoughts about what this might mean. And Michael, as the newly elected tax assessor, is thinking about what this all means from a tax point of view, which is actually very interesting. He'll tell us a little bit more about that. I think what I'd like to do is leave their expertise to be more, let's tap into that with questions. And then I think probably there'll be some things they'll expound on some of their observations during the course of that. And we'll work that out. I think we're very concerned about time and we want to get to Q&A. And I know there are a bunch of people on Zoom. And so we'll figure that out. Sade is going to help us usher those folks through with questions. So Paula, if you would like to step on.
Thank you. So I am going to attempt to do an overview, a very high level overview of what's going on with the law in Needham. I will not be offended to be corrected by anybody if I say anything that's not right. So as Cece said, it was 2019 that town meeting approved an ADU bylaw. And that was restricted in the ways that Cece just said. Then in in 2023, town meeting made changes to that bylaw. And the most important parts of those changes are two. One, there is no longer a special permit process. It is not required to get a special permit. They can be built by right. Obviously, there are lots of building laws, codes that need to be adhered to. The other big change, as you've heard, is that now the additional unit can be rented to anyone. There is a 6-month minimum on that lease so that we don't have very short-term turnover. Exactly. And there are requirements for proving occupancy, who's there, etc., to the building department. And those need to be renewed. If anyone's wondering, if you move out of your house and you have an ADU, the occupancy okay by the building department has to be done by the new owner. It doesn't transfer. Just something to know. When the bylaw was voted in town meeting, as all bylaws do, I guess, or most, they have to go to the state for approval. And this one did that. And the state approved it. And then the law was posted in May, yeah. And so it is the law. There are some suggestions that were made by the AG's office as to language. They don't necessarily affect the major pieces of the legislation, but the planning board will be taking up some changes to some of the language in the bylaw going forward. But it is a law now, and you can go to the building department and build yourself an ADU, right? The other thing we wanted to mention is that there is activity around ADUs at the state level right now. There is something called the Affordable Homes Act, otherwise known as the Housing Bond Bill. And that bill has been approved in some form by the House of Representatives. It has been approved in some form by the Senate. So the next step is for them to get together and present a combined bill that they work out to the governor for signature. In both the House version and the Senate version right now is the ability across the state to build detached ADUs as well as attached, meaning within the primary structure. So if that were to pass, and it is likely that it will pass, then Needham, like the rest of the municipalities, people will be allowed to build detached ADUs. Those of you who may be concerned about that, and especially those of you who are on town meeting and know the lively discussion at some point about detached ADUs, the municipality will still have the ability to make certain changes, for example, setbacks, height, that kind of thing. So it's not just a given. We do have some control over how that particular piece of the legislation is implemented. That's your high level thing, summary. And so where we wanted to go from here is Oscar will take over again and show you some ADUs here so that we can visualize what those might look like, plans, etc. And then we'll open up for questions.
Sade, can we roll the?
Yes, we can.
So we went down to the building department and collected what was available from the town's archives on the plans that Daphne and the special permit process produced from 2023. And Andrew and Romeo are the fortunate members to be here tonight to talk about their process, but we also have pictures of for you of our discrete photography of going around town taking pictures of these houses now with the ADUs. And then there's a set of plans that we put together with these that show where the ADU is. I think I got some of them right. I definitely got theirs wrong, which is embarrassing, but they're going to correct that. And so you'll see there are many ways that these are being done. And I think it's going to come down to actually every case is going to be a case-by-case solution. And going from adding something in an existing house to putting an addition on to building a whole new house and incorporating an ADU in that concept, which is what these guys did. So I think it's a valuable resource for people to kind of get their ideas going, help them stimulate some thoughts. We are going to be creating a website for everybody here and others who want to learn more about ADUs. So this information will be available online, so you'll be able to go look at it. And then you'll be able to also get other access to the information on the town's website. And so there'll be resources that we want to make available. The town will be doing that themselves at some point, but they're still in the process, as Paula said, of doing the final work on the writing of the bylaw from the Attorney General's comments. So I'm going to leave it. I'm going to hand it over here to Andrew and Romeo to talk a little bit about theirs, which will be coming up. Maybe we passed that on. Can we go to 16? There we go. Great. Oh, you're 33. Sorry, Fenton. Yes, 33 Fenton.
Oh, I think she's down.
86.
86,
It's not
25,
numerical.
33.
There.
Gorgeous home.
Right. Right.
Oh, man.
Do you want me to walk through the
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
of the design?
Yeah, what you did with the process.
Sure. So,
Why you did it.
yep, I'm Andrew McKinney. This is the house that we built. We started this in 2021 when it was, when the process required a special permit. We had been searching for a house to bring my mom along and finding that not a lot of homes accommodate, a senior first floor bedroom, that kind of thing. So we ended up just deciding, you know what, we're gonna try to build a home. Romeo found out from his own research that Needham had passed this in 2019, I guess. And so we went through the process, and it looks pretty seamless. The side, I can show a little bit, but basically there's a side door next to the garage that enters into kind of a common mudroom area, and he'll show.
Can you go back to the photo for a second? No, this is fine. Okay. So.
Yep.
So that's the mudroom area. Basically, you're coming in driveway. You come in this side. This is the side door. So you come in. This is the mudroom, and then basically from here it splits. There's a door going into the main house, and there's a door going into the living space, basically living room, kitchen of the ADU.
Would you mind using the mic, Romeo, for the folks on Zoom? Thank you so much. Does it stretch? There we go.
Yeah, so basically this area here is the first floor of the ADU. So our ADU was set up on 2 separate floors because we're limited by the coverage area, so we couldn't basically have the first floor like larger. So we ended up having to put the living room, kitchen on the first floor, and then we basically have a set of staircase that goes up to just above the garage. So that's where the bedroom for the ADU is.
Next plan.
Next plan.
Yes, go to the next.
All right.
So basically,
Hold on, let me zoom in.
so this is above the garage. So we built, so there's a bedroom with a bath, and we did it so it's seamless because you could actually, this is the laundry area could be used by both sides. So basically his mom, if she wants to do laundry,
Nice.
could go in. But at the same time, we also have access. If anything were to happen, we could just simply go to her bedroom and in there. So the whole, we set it up as if it was like a single dwelling with some privacy as far as like she could have her own kitchen and cook her own meal if she wanted to. Most of the time actually we spent all the evenings together anyway, but it's there in case she wants to. So when you look from the outside, if you want to go back to the picture, it looks like it's a single family home. There's nothing, when you look from the front, there's nothing saying that this is like 2 units in here.
Yeah, you can never tell.
You have the main entrance and then you have the side entrance that you normally have near a garage, next to a garage.
That's gorgeous. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so we did this as trying to accommodate having, relative living with us. We weren't thinking about, extra income or anything like that. So we were happy to see that Needham had the ability to, even with the restrictions back then. I know now there's no more restrictions, but back then it was something that we wanted to pursue. So we were happy that Needham allowed us to do it. The permitting process was a little, crazy because we didn't know that you have to actually have a special permit for this. So again, today that's no longer required, but at the time we put in the permit for the house just to find out that because we had an ADU, we had to go through a special permitting process. So that was it put a little stop to our process, but we kind of went along. We decided to go ahead and start building while the permitting was, being worked out, and in the end it worked all out. So no problems there.
Thank you.
So I think that's it. Thank you, guys. It's now 7:25, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
We have any questions? I'll talk to, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, hang.
I'm pondering, those units can have a lockable door as opposed to like a bathroom door. Because in a single family unit, you can't put a lockable door between interior spaces. That's one. Should a person have a property that's got a lot of frontage, can you have separate parking that is not part of the main parking? Some of my clients have their 22-foot parking space for 2 cars, but their yard is so large that if we put a accessory building as opposed to use their basement, the accessory building, because it's a very large yard, can it have its own driveway entrance? I see everyone here, they seem to be either a basement or a built-in space dedicated to a rentable situation. Great. Obviously basement spaces, we need egress for bedrooms in case of fire, understandable. But accessory driveways would be nice because sometimes some driveways only fit 2 cars today.
Right.
If you add an egress unit, and they have a third space, maybe a separate drive-in from a corner street or some way of parking. Do I require, especially on accessory dwellings, separate water, separate sewer, separate electricity? Whether they can be combined or it should be separated would be nice to know. My clients are asking on the expense of adding this unit. The lockability between units is big for them. They're worried because a lot of times if you're renting a room, you can't have a deadlock. You have to have a privacy lock that you can get through.
Right, it's an egress.
Yeah.
That's right, so they can't be locked from
So those
one or the
are
other
probably
side.
the most important.
Right, I think on the parking, it's gonna be a case-by-case basis, whether they want to create separate
I'd like to
parking.
know where it's paying for.
Any other thoughts from this panel about the response to the questions, George?
Well, the only thing I would call out is under the rule. The interior door between the 2 units is required.
Yeah.
But I don't believe the regulation calls for, speaks at all to whether it can or cannot be lockable.
Okay.
So as long as there is sufficient egress under the building code otherwise,
Yeah,
I would think that you'd be able to put a lock on
that
that.
would be helpful.
But the egress requirements of the building code will otherwise have to be.
Understand. You know, be 2 ways out, 3 ways out. The more the better, the more the safe. Gotcha.
Can I just get back on the parking? It's on the paperwork, it says on-street parking. I know in Needham, we don't have on-street parking. So how do we?
Wired on site.
It does, but it does say here, off-street parking shall be provided by residents of those unit.
Off-street.
Okay, okay.
Oh, good.
There is the requirements that parking be provided.
Whether it's off the same egress, if there's more spaces, but whether another egress will be determined by. Okay, that makes sense.
Do they know? Do they still work if you take the string out?
Yeah.
If you take the string out? The string? Is it allowed? The wire?
If like it's a trail or something, great apartment or.
Not doing it.
That's great. So I was talking with somebody who wants to add something for a relative with disability. And they talked about a freight department, which sounded like a self-contained. I don't know, I mean, I envision like a trailer or something. That would be. Yeah, prefabricated, I guess that's the word. Prefabricated that would come in and then either have a hallway or something or not to the main building. That's what you think.
Could you repeat the question for us, Oscar?
The question is, this is, yeah, I think there's a question about whether or not there's some prefabricated solutions to building ADUs. And I'd say, I think there are a lot of actually companies that are making prefabricated ADUs around the country. I don't know to what extent that's a going thing here in Massachusetts, but I suspect there would be some. It's trickier if it's attaching it to an existing structure. So an attached ADU is inherently part of a house. As an attached ADU, I can see a prefabricated unit being, brought in and assembled as a detached ADU, but we're not capable of doing that right now.
And the prefabricated can be attached.
You could, sure. Then we could do a prefabricated house, so you could do a prefabricated portion of a house. Yeah. But that's something that I don't know how relevant or how readily available that those are at the moment.
Can folks?
That's something I'm just gonna add this one.
Yeah, it's on. It's on.
Huntington Homes does a lot of that stuff in doing. We have a question here.
Hi, can you speak to the financing of the ADUs? I understand there might be money to help those of us that really do need the financial help to build the ADU. I read that there's a home modification loan program. And the city of Boston is giving money, but what about us? I don't know what's available.
Anybody up there know?
I would think if a construction loan or some of the products that you just mentioned, that would be my thinking. I'm not personally aware of anything specific to ADUs other than those options.
Well, I mean, this home modification loan program is a $50,000 loan, 0% interest. And you don't pay it off until either the sale of the home is transferred or you sell the house. So
Sounds like something we should find out
yeah,
about. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I think that's.
Yeah, I'll make a note of it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Other questions?
I asked earlier whether the attached building has to have its own utilities, water, sewer, electric.
Right.
Do they have to be separated? Or in some situations, could the owner add that to the rent as opposed to having part of the building department that's separate sewer, separate electric, separate gas?
I know that when we actually built the ADU, the rule was that it couldn't have separate utilities. So that would, no.
Some questions on that.
So it was, when we applied for the permitting, unless it changed, it couldn't have a separate meter.
In your situation, it was that way.
Yeah, so I don't know if that changed since.
Could they be separate?
That would be
That
the,
would be a testimony you would take to the building commissioner.
Okay,
And I'm sure he would.
I mean, it's worth the investment.
but I think that, it's, yeah, have that conversation with them.
Okay.
Just remember that, I mean, when this started was, they wanted to make this as a way for a family member to live there. So the idea was there was no need for separate utilities. Now that if it's allowed to be a rental, I don't think there's gonna be an issue with saying, yeah, sure, you can put a separate meter.
Some people don't want to cure someone's waste, thousands of gallons of water, he does that. I mean, I know Massachusetts allows apartments to have individual meters. It's safe for the store owner, to let not get abused. No, it works in both worlds.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not really.
It's not. We do have a couple questions.
Yeah, but they've got some questions.
Can you guys hear me?
Audience.
Oh, it's kind of quiet, but I will hug the mic.
Good.
We have a couple of different questions from folks on Zoom that I do want to uplift. Deanna asks, does detached mean if you have a detached garage and wanted to create an ADU, you couldn't until the detached ADU law is passed? Or could they still count that as an attached unit?
It's considered detached. It's considered detached and it would not. You cannot.
It is considered
Oh,
detached, Deanna.
Yeah.
Yes,
Unless you can find a way to attach it.
unless you could find a way to attach it. Okay, we do have, there you go. William wanted to ask if my house is sold, the permit does not transfer. We did answer that a little bit earlier, William. So it has to be permitted by the new owner. So say you sold the house and I buy your house, I have to approve the current tenant to continue to occupy that space.
You have to get a new permit.
Correction, you have to get a new permit. Thank you,
By
Paula.
right, you're allowed it.
Yeah.
It's your choice whether to accept it or just like, I don't want to say, I want.
You have to go through the same if the ownership of the house that has an ADU changes hands, the new owner has to go through the same permitting process with the building department as the original owner did. It is not transferable.
But you're
So,
allowed it.
so let me understand this because
Yeah, this is
could I
it.
respond, could I augment that question? So how does this make any sense? It's already been approved. Then the new owner has to essentially put in a permit, but why would it be refused if it's already been approved previously? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Nobody said that it would be refused.
Okay, right.
It simply in our bylaws says
Okay.
that you have to reapply. As a new owner, you have to go through the same process that the original owner went through. That's just in our bylaw.
Okay, so if when we're in being completely, transparent with a new prospective owner, one would say it's not automatic, but you can likely assume that it will be approved based on the fact that it was approved before. No guarantee, but that is essentially, that would be the correct answer, correct?
Correct.
That's nodding, so I would say yes.
So what I'm saying is,
I want to get some
the
other
person
people.
who's not forced to rent a unit, if they did choose, they could go back to single.
Yes, correct,
Not-
correct.
That is correct.
Correct.
I have one question to clarify this. When we talk about the permit, are we talking about the building permit for the ADU that I have to apply for, or the occupancy permit?
Permit.
Okay, so I think that's, people have to understand is you not have to go through like as you're building the ADU, it's just basically you're asking for the occupancy permit to be.
Thank you very much. Yes, that is correct. Let's go to Anna.
Okay, I following up on this. So what happens if there is a tenant in the middle of the purchase? So that's where I'm looking a little like, there's gotta be something in between, right? Because I don't know.
I don't know the answer to that. Anybody know the answer to that? Sure, thank you, Stan.
So presumably, what you would have happen is the seller and the buyer would need to coordinate and probably try and get the approval almost simultaneous or immediately before the actual closing. However, I think the way to look at the buyer coming in and going through the process is more of just a check-in to make sure that all the requirements are still met. So you can imagine a situation where a house might be sold. The buyer might sort of say, well, I'm going to keep the ADU and I'm going to comply, but then maybe they don't actually comply by requiring them by requiring the buyer to go through the process with the town, it gives the town a chance to check in and confirm that all the requirements are still met with the change in ownership. So timing wise, I'm not sure because this is relatively new. So I'm not aware of any that have gone through this yet, but I would think it would be a matter of buyer and seller coordinating to do it. You know, it's a logistical issue more than anything else.
Their rental agreement, such things, right?
Thank you. Other questions?
Matt? I'm gonna ask a question to the tax assessor. I'm really curious how this increases taxes.
I'm not sure why it would increase other people's taxes. It's just that it would be assessed based on, well, so the way assessment mostly works with rentals is you have you have a database that has lots of information about all the different houses, and it looks at different sales as they come up. It also looks at building permits and changes as they come up. And then basically it gets updated with all that information, and then it kind of makes tweaks along the way. And then every 5 years, when we're coming up on that year, there's a major revaluation of the whole property across the whole town. More likely in the case of a new, so the way it works in under Proposition 2.5, the entire the entire amount of tax that's collected can only grow a limited amount, 2.5%, plus what's called new growth. So if you're building either a new construction or you're building an addition, the increase in that would be considered part of new growth, and that's what would be paid by that taxpayer. And then that would get built into the base. So it really wouldn't have any effect on other people. It would have an effect on the people who build the ADU, but it shouldn't have any effect on anyone else.
Well, that's what I'm getting at, is that if the ADU costs a couple $100,000, then you're gonna be paying more in taxes in order to have the ADU, right?
Right, just as any addition or any enhanced value to your property that's new well, should get picked up in the records. And then so people who are building that would likely see an addition. One thing I'm not quite sure of, and I don't think our database is well set up for this at this point, is like, for instance, what if you could just carve out 800 square feet out of your existing footprint and turn it into an ADU? I believe the way the system is set up right now, it wouldn't make any difference really. You'd still have the same size house. I think that's probably going to change. And part of the problem is so much is based on what's happened in the past and what happens going forward. And so a lot of it is, for instance, we have lots and lots of records of approximately $1 million center entrance colonial sales. And we have all kinds of stuff on $2.5 million large new house sales. What we don't have is a track record of houses with ADU sales. So there just isn't anything like that. So I think that's going to be something that's going to have to be figured out more along the way.
So in theory, I'm looking at potentially converting a garage. So
Attached garage.
it's, right, attached garage.
Unheated
Currently,
living
right,
space,
right,
so
right.
it might be an
Now, it's
adjustment
for
for that.
cars, and if I convert that over to an ADU, the floor, that's gonna add square footage, right? So any of that is going to increase.
Right, just like any amenity, like if you had no garage and you put in a new garage, that would increase, that would have a modest increase in value. Or if you had a 1-car garage and built a 2-car garage, that's going to have that. Now, it probably won't be a lot.
Unheated
But-
opposed to heated.
Yeah, I don't know how,
Question mark.
yeah, I'm not sure if
Question mark.
it makes much difference, but.
Well,
Related to that, I'm wondering if we could ask Ned if you may or may not have experience with how having an ADU affects the value of the property in general.
Well, I think I'm gonna piggyback what we just said. It's a road that has not really been traveled.
Yeah.
Locally. Okay, so until we have some talks of homes, we gotta get a real solid feel. But it's it's not something you're gonna be able to go onto your computer and look up to Zillow, find out
Right,
what's my value.
right.
So that makes it interesting for
Yeah.
my job. Because it comes down to the livability of the house, how well the unit was carved out. And will it have a good future use to the next person? Because they may not have an elderly person to care for, they may be looking for space to work at home, you know, away from everybody else. So I think it's all gonna be about the design, the implementation, doing it at the right price, and then I don't think that most people are gonna do this to speculate. There may be some new builders that will, but the existing homeowners probably doing it out of a personal need, but they wanna look down the road and say, what kind of return can I expect to get? And I think it's gonna be a very individual analysis to get to that point as to, it's getting good people and a team together, good architect and a good builder and a good budget and the right design and it's gonna be a winner for you, but it's gonna be carefully done as well.
Great,
Thank you
Yeah,
very much. I
I-
have an
Wait, just a minute, I think there was there something else, Daphne?
Yeah, I'd like to piggyback on.
Please do. And
I'd like to.
shove it in your mouth.
I'd like to piggyback on the cases that I've seen. That indeed, when they're coming in, it isn't for speculation. It's really something that you're thinking about, and I would say that even of the 12 cases that have come before the town, many of these people are looking at their home long-term. We're talking generations. We've had people who actually came to the meetings and said, I want to have my wife's parents live in this unit. And then they ask them, and what happens if they're not there? Well, my parents will move in there.
Mm.
And then goes, and by the way, when, maybe our kids will need it, and goes, and definitely we're moving into it when our children are. So there's a very different perspective and I would say the majority of those who went through this very rigorous process, and it was during COVID, it was demonstrable that they're looking differently at property. They're looking for the long term.
That's kind of an interesting question.
Yeah, go ahead.
If a single person, retired, elderly, wants to rent a portion of their house in this, are they limited to like the size of the rental? Let's say they only need one bedroom in their kitchen, living, dining room, but they want to rent 2 or 3 bedrooms with 2 bathrooms and the garage. Can they rent more than half of their house?
Are you
Well, I
asking
think
in
you're
terms of,
basically saying that the
yeah.
homeowner might live in the ADU and then they
Oh, no.
rent the house.
Yeah,
So you just-
yeah.
But
I hear.
so right,
50, 50, 25, 75.
no, the ADU is 900 maximum square feet, one bedroom. So you have, that's your one chip and then the rest of the house is the balance,
There you go.
And
900.
for that situation in our zoning law, we
The owl
have-
gets her. She's good. No, the owl gets her.
in our zoning law has the ability to have a boarding house. And those are the boarding house, if you wanted to rent a room, it's very specific in our bylaw,
Okay.
it allows it. So I think you were kind of talking about renting rooms.
Yes.
Not creating an ADU. Our bylaw allows for that, but again, it's restrictive and you need to come in for a special.
4 adults per address. I've heard of boarding houses.
And I'm reading from the law that it's a self-contained, that an ADU is a self-contained dwelling unit and a complete separate housekeeping unit containing provisions for living, sleeping, cooking, and eating.
Laundry and all.
I dig it.
Well, not necessarily.
Dig it. Any other
Yeah,
questions?
what else? What else do that you want?
We have 2
I don't
questions
want you
here.
to leave and then start talking to your friend with your question, or here. So
Yeah.
ask it now.
You got to get real close to the mic.
Really, I'm just a little surprised to see that an ADU is limited to 3 people. It seems to sort of preclude young families.
Mm. Good question.
Interesting that the comment was that ADUs are restricted to 3 people and 5 people total, just a minute, please. Between both of the units. And that seems, to leave out some people, right, or some families. And in our materials that you'll get, we are linking to the Attorney General's response to our new bylaw. And in that, they do make comments. While they approve the law, they think we should think about that. We should think about that restriction because it may be that it, that it eliminates certain families. And that would not,
Right.
for example,
Right.
one cannot discriminate against families in Massachusetts for housing. One cannot. So it's a very good point. And we will see how the town decides to make amendments based on that feedback from the chief. Thank you. There was one more.
Yeah, we'll take a couple of other questions. You had a question as well?
Yeah, please.
Thank you. I think it was just addressed, but just to get confirmation, is it acceptable by the current bylaws for the primary, the owners of the property to be the occupier of the ADU and to rent the main house?
Yes.
The answer to that is.
Yes.
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 Yeah. Okay, you're gonna get to Barry?
That's huge.
Right? Right? You can take your little house and you can go in this one and you can make some money on the side. I like that.
I'm just wondering how long the town process takes? Like by the
Right.
time some kind of paperwork is filed with the
That's a
town.
good question. There's a process,
How long is that?
folks.
I'm looking at George.
Yeah, I would think it would just be the normal processing time for a building permit, maybe a couple extra days. But it should just, because it's by right, you don't have to go to the Board of Appeals. There's no special zoning process. Just file the building permit application with the supporting documents. And, and that process is supposed to take no longer than 30 days. I think it's varied. I believe it's roughly 2 weeks these days, but I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, just point of clarification, when you were doing the ZBA special permit process, how did that compare time-wise?
You follow the standard process and it is 3 months from the time you submit your application. There are a lot of the steps are required by the state bylaw, Mass General Law. It's not something cavalier that we're trying to put this in there. You're required to put 2 ads. So therefore you need to make the time to get it in the paper. So there you go, from the time that you submitted your application until you go before the zoning board of appeal, it was a month. Then they write the decision. I brought an example of a decision back in the day. And that takes the time to create. And then it gets filed with the town clerk. And then there's a 21-day appeal period. So everybody's told it's 3 months.
So that's a big step.
That is gone.
Yeah.
That is gone. So now the town, hooray, a shout out to town meeting.
Yeah.
And to advocates for removing that, because it was amazing during this time. We have to remember that these ADUs came in exactly when COVID hit. Our very second ZBA meeting on Zoom back in the dark, scary days, that was one of our very first cases. And they came in and they got it done, and we needed to do it because also it was tied in. Remember when people were losing jobs, we did not want to slow anything down. So we tried to, help people through the process. And it was just, 3 months. That is so gone. So shout out to all the hard work, the housing advocates, town meeting members.
Sure.
Town meeting members saw this and, we have now data and you were able to bring it here, this is really good community process.
Great. Got another question here?
More questions?
Yeah, Anna's got one.
Follow
No more on Zoom. No more on Zoom.
No more?
Not yet.
follow up to the, I'm assuming that if the property where the ADU is gonna be built, but wetlands and all that, the Conservation Commission will be involved. So that process remains the same as any building, any, okay. Just.
Or if there is a non-conformity, if there's a non-conformity on your property, you would still need to seek a special permit to take care of that. And we had one case of the 12.
Can you explain what that means?
Like, I'll let George.
Can we use Oscar's one?
So,
Oh, yeah.
so there are a lot
There
of
we go.
houses in Needham, because the bylaws have changed over the years with respect to setbacks, lot coverage, things like that. There are a lot of houses in Needham that don't comply with the current requirements. And depending upon the situation, if you're going to then put an addition on, say, you may be able to do it, but you may need to go through a review process to alter the non-conforming house. And as a part of that, you go before the Board of Appeals. And really it's, so we did have one that was both an ADU and an alteration of a non-conforming house. The house did not meet the setbacks. So the addition they wanted to put on had to go through the review process sort of no matter what. But one of the reasons they were doing the addition was to create living space for a parent. So they needed the ADU as well. So we did it as a one-stop kind of a combined hearing, because that was when you had to go to the Board of Appeals in the ADU. But basically, if you have a house that's non-conforming and what you are doing, it's kind of a complex answer, but sometimes you have a non-conforming house, you don't have to go for relief. It depends on the specifics, of how your house is non-conforming and what specifically you want to do. Right? So if it's a non-conforming and you're doing something that triggers a need for review, that's still the same. It's like with conservation, the ADU piece now is completely separate. So it's just the normal process.
We do have a thought on Zoom that we'd like to share with the people. This mic is giving us a run for our money, let me tell you. Thank you, Joni, for contributing to the conversation. Joni said, I think ADUs are a start to help find ways that will allow senior citizens to stay in this town. I checked out Wingate, the new building that they are planning, and a 2-bedroom unit starts at, it says 16,000, but I believe it was a typo. I think it's 1,600 a month. It's 16,000 a month?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Assisted.
And I thought my rent was bad. Thank you. Okay. A 2-bedroom unit starts at 16,000 a month. More housing for only the very wealthy is what Joni is saying. I want to stay in Needham forever, and an ADU may be a key way for many of us who can't afford the startling rate of 16,000. And I hope that these are embraced and encouraged. Thank you, Joni. I agree. Any other questions here in person?
Yeah.
Maybe Oscar, you want to?
Yes.
It's coming on. It's coming loose. Yeah.
So yeah, this is.
I think that's why
this
the
is about
quality is so bad.
Looking at ADU as a possibility for a rental, and maybe sort of, Ned, you can answer this question. So in terms of if we're building an ADU for rental purposes, or whether the person who lives in the main home wants to be in the ADU and rent the main house, what's the market for rentals in Needham currently?
Very, very good.
I would move. Yeah.
There's a shortage of rental units in town. So it's difficult to sit, a 900 square foot unit, not, for instance, a 1-bedroom apartment will rent that's new or newer is gonna rent for $2,500. So will you get that in a
The family
in a
provision
unit
is
in
still
your
in the
house?
bylaw.
We don't really know yet, but it's not gonna be far from that, probably. And
think we
then
should
I think determining the value of the rental of the existing house is a lot easier because we have a history.
Yeah.
But it's a great thing because it's gonna serve a great need for people to get in or stay house if they want. That help?
Yes.
We have a question on Zoom. Yes, we're the other.
Oh,
We're not gonna make it. Michelle, we can feel free to unmute.
Hi, thank
Hi.
you. Yeah, so my question is if there's any interplay between ADUs in Needham and affordable housing in Needham. And we started talking about this, but I sort of have a more legal question, which is there any, or tax question, is there any benefit to renting at a lower rate? Like, can you get is there any way for these things to work together? Because there are so many people who can't afford, not just the elderly, but there's so many people who can't afford to live in Needham. And I think that it would be nice if an ADU was available at a lower price for someone who is low income, and if the owner would have an incentive from that. And I just wondered if there is any such interplay.
And Margaret, you got this?
So from what I've seen in other places, there's not a lot of incentive for someone to own a house and then have a reduced rent. I mean, there's all kinds of things you have to do to sort of figure out what the rent would be and who's in charge of it and all that, but it's not a financial benefit for the homeowner to do that.
Right, no.
So Section 8, a whole nother thing, you can get Section 8 vouchers, but there's only not very many people have Section 8 vouchers. And once again, the homeowner would have to accept that. And it's complicated about how you figure that all out. It's not something that a single family homeowner would probably be very interested in doing. There are a few around and they're mostly for sale. But once again,
But it's worth.
the house is, the unit is sold for much less.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well, one thing I'd
add.
like to add is just, and it's, what was it, Michelle?
Yes.
Yeah, Michelle, I feel you. I agree with all of that. The thing is, it is market. It's market rate. So we're relying on the goodness of people. However, I think the entire state effort to get more housing focuses on affordable housing, but also focuses on market rate housing, given the theory that the more units that are available, prices will at least stabilize, if not come down. One of the reasons our prices are so high is, as Ned said, there's not enough of it. Supply is limited, and so prices are very high. So in the long run, more units should at least stabilize prices.
Sir.
I have a client who has a very large two-family. They're wondering if they could take the top floor of one of their two families and create a smaller unit.
Sure, they can do whatever they want. I'm not understanding the question.
Oh,
Yeah.
they got a two-family.
Yeah, I think you answered the question.
Yeah.
But one side never rents fully. I mean, they under rented. They split that to a 900 square foot, a 1,200 square foot, and then they're 2,400 square foot. As opposed to 2,400 square foot units. You're not gonna allow a third.
Why not?
Not an ADU, but.
When one side is.
The bylaw is very specific, only one ADU per lot and it's single
Per
family.
lot.
Which is
And
good
it's
to know.
also
But-
Single family.
So it doesn't discuss, it doesn't discuss multi-families?
No,
Okay.
unfortunately.
Thank you.
Both prior bylaw, the original bylaw from 2019
Yeah.
and the revised bylaw.
Yeah.
Both are very clear, single family only.
Okay. Gotcha.
And I think there was some discussion at one point about maybe expanding it, but
Okay.
obviously that.
But for now.
Didn't come through. Yeah. I have another question via Zoom, if I may.
Yeah, please. And then there's somebody in the corner there. Please.
So Debbie is asking, are additional rights afforded to abutters to challenge ADUs versus conventional home remodeling? Will developers be allowed to build new developments with ADUs included? Debbie, I understand the second half of your question. I'm not sure I understand the first half. We have nods? Hold on, we'll get you an answer, Debbie. Careful, the bottom's falling off.
Right, so under the old regime, the old process, because it was a special permit process that went to the Board of Appeals, there was a public participation component that was over and above your standard typical, right, your review for neighbors and so on. Now that it's by right, it doesn't go through that, so now it's just a building permit. And every building permit, there is the ability for anybody to appeal a building permit within 30 days of the issuance of the permit. But that's kind of a standard thing for all building permits. There's no additional or special review that's given to abutters for these. And as a side note, I mean, I have to say, I've handled 2 of these, and I've talked to several people, and I have represented lots of builders and developers, and I can't foresee a builder or developer wanting to do these on a speculative basis. I know we already talked about that earlier, but it's not the sort of thing that for what the additional cost to put in a whole second kitchen versus the potential to maybe make a little extra, it probably isn't worth it. It's too speculative. They're more likely to just simply do the house and move on and go to the next one. And what was the second part of that question?
You answered it.
Other questions? I would think.
Hi, I am an affordable housing advocate and disability advocate in Newton, and I want to give a shout out to Michelle, I think it was, who asked the question about affordability. I also want to say, CC, I really loved your overview. I think that I guess that my concern is, how is this going to affect accessibility for people with disabilities? Because not only are seniors needing and wanting to stay in the homes, but we also have the issue. So is this going to then potentially exclude people with disabilities from having access to these ADUs? I think these ADUs are a phenomenal idea. I just love the thought about inclusion, really being able to live in a town like Needham, which I personally adore, and would live here, by the way, if it was affordable. But I guess that my biggest question is just about accessibility. What is the town doing in terms of that? I mean, Chapter 151B, not to be quoting the Fair Housing Statute, but I don't know that I've seen any sort of a revision, and I'll be curious to see what happens now with this housing law. But has anyone spoken to that, thought about that? Because obviously we need to make sure that we have equal opportunities for, everyone. Well, any kind of, it doesn't have to be a wheelchair, that's kind of like an arcane term. Really not a term that we like to use in the disability community, but anyone that has a mobility disability, like me, I do. So I need to have an accessible unit, not necessarily wheelchair, but I'm just curious if anyone's given any thought to that. Thank you.
I think that's a really good question. I don't have an answer. I'm not sure if it is.
We addressed that with the design. Like, we tried to get everything on the first floor and it just didn't work. But we did a wide staircase, and my mom is a chairlift just because of mobility issues, and it works. It has worked very well for us. But I think her question is the ADU process in the town also tying in with accessibility? I'm guessing.
It's a rental for a non-family.
Right.
And I think what you did was great. How many homeowners are going to want to,
Yeah, that's a great question.
Such a cost, but I think it's a really important question, and I really implore you to think about that. Thank you, because it's really hard to find accessible buildings. That's what they're called.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to find them. And I just think this is such a sweet idea. I just love the thought of being able to put it on someone else's property, but it's still kind of like your home. Have your own privacy. So just like this, right? I just feel like I'm being. But we need to make it accessible and available so everyone can partake.
Thank you very much for bringing that up. No, that's very important. We got a question on the phone. With the, okay, I'm interested in the ability to rent ADUs and what happens if the landlord, meaning the current owner, vacates the property, meaning that they're going to sell it, and the lease has not expired.
It's a good question.
So, George, what would, I mean, it gives us an opportunity to also to talk about leases and how important it is to get legal help if you are planning to rent this thing out.
Right, so presumably the lease would continue after the closing, so the new buyers in a sale situation would then need to, it's basically what we talked about earlier, they would then need to go through the process and go to the building department, basically submit that they're gonna live in the whichever unit, and then that they qualify for the ADU and keep it going. Now, a good question and something that's not addressed is, you know, what happens if there's a lease in place and it gets sold, but the new buyer doesn't go through that process? You know, under the regulation, that voids the right to have the ADU. And, you know, that would be a tricky situation. And I would definitely say that speaks to anybody wanting to rent as a landlord or wanting to rent as a tenant, would be well advised to at least have a consultation with a lawyer to make sure provisions are put in place to cover that. Because it could be a bit of a tricky situation. Not the least of which is because Massachusetts has some of the best, strictest, strongest tenant rights in the entire country.
Right, that's what I was gonna ask. Are they
I
not?
would say the lease should go
Yeah.
through.
Michelle has another question or sort of a follow-up to her first question. And I think
I can
Margaret
just-
may be able to, oh, go for it. Yeah, come
I
on.
can just talk. I basically, I just wanted to say that I am interested in finding out how a family could use an ADU for affordable housing if they were willing to accept Section 8 vouchers. I am interested in doing that for my house. And I would love to know if there's anyone on the panel who could help walk me through the complexities of that, because it sounds like the answer to my first question was it's a huge pain in the neck and nobody would do it because they won't make money off of it. So my follow-up question is, I don't need to make money off of it. Can somebody help walk me through the huge pain in the neck?
Snaps to that. Yeah, yeah. Right, sure. Oh, we're getting
Yeah,
crickets in the
we have
room.
someone who doesn't know the answer, but does have important things to say.
Sorry.
Like, this is, Jim Flanagan, who's also part of our coalition. It wasn't here when we made it.
Yeah, now the vice chair of the Needham Housing.
You gotta hug the mic, Jim.
Yeah, you gotta.
Vice chair of the Needham Housing Authority for all of about 3 months, so. Clearly not an expert on this. The Needham Housing Authority does manage Section 8 vouchers. I think Margaret hit a key point there that, there's a limited amount of them.
Yeah.
Right, so the first is someone has to have them, and there's a backlog. There's a waiting list for Section 8 vouchers, as there is for all sorts of affordable housing. And I'll stop there. I don't know what it takes for a landlord, honestly. My sense is it's always been larger landlords who participate in the program. So I'm not sure what the opportunity is for one-off, but we will explore that with the NHA and get back to y'all.
Thank you. And is the shortage of vouchers related to the shortage of housing? Or are they independent?
Yeah.
It's
the big bad
it's
boogeyman.
independent. It's a shortage of state and federal funding.
Okay, thank you.
Margaret, can we get the mic over to Margaret?
So the first thing that you have to do is get a lawyer. And you have to do a deed restriction on the property. And then there's regulatory agreements that you have to get into with the town and with the state. To have your property be an affordable unit. And then you have to figure out the affordability that you want to offer. And then there's, obviously there's the Section 8 vouchers, but there's not very many of those. So most of the stuff in Needham that's affordable is in the big 40Bs.
Yep.
And those units have 20 or 25% affordable units, but those are deed restricted and they'll be affordable forever. So it's complicated and you need a good lawyer.
I am a lawyer and I'm going through this with the family that I sponsor, a family of asylees. And I can't take care of them because unless they live in my living room, they're in Lynn or they're way the heck away because they can't afford to be anywhere near me. So how do I help them really acclimate to America if I can't be near them? And so that's where I ended up with this question. And I will stop this because I know that it's going nowhere and we have more things to talk about. But anyone who wants to help me, please let me know.
Thank you for raising. Okay, we have time for a couple more. Did I see any? I see one hand, and then I'd like to ask our panel if there's anyone who has something to say that hasn't been asked. So think about that for a minute and we'll go over here.
I just wanted to comment back to Lucy. I'm a social worker in the community. I work with a lot of people who need subsidized housing. And if you can, the market actually, the rents that people who do have a Section 8 actually you won't be losing a lot of money. Take them in as a tenant.
Mm.
The market rate there, those rents are actually pretty on with what someone's going to get on the regular market. So don't let that dissuade you from renting from someone with a subsidy.
Yeah. Thank you. Anybody want to add something?
Can I just make a small distinction?
Sure.
Section 8.
Wait.
Hold on, start again.
I'm sorry, I just want to make the distinction. Section 8 and affordable housing are two totally separate.
Yeah.
I just want to, I'm not sure that everyone understands that just from some of the comments, so I just wanted to make that distinction too.
Yeah.
And I think that your point is well spoken about the rent. I'm actually trying to help someone who has a Section 8 voucher. I was so happy to see what it covered. But the problem moreover is trying to get someone to take that in a private, so we're looking at affordable housing list because those are the rents that are pretty much going to cover the Section 8 or the Section 8 would cover. So they are different, but similar.
You want to mention the resources that you
have?
Yeah.
Definitely. So I think it's time to run. Thank you, each and every one of you, for coming and sharing. Before you get up, or while you're getting, a couple of things I'd like to say. One is that two future things that are coming up. We are going to be doing walking tours of the areas that will be rezoned to comply with the MBTA Communities Act. If you are not signed up for our newsletter, please sign up so that you can be informed. One is July 16th, one is August 1st, one is August 7th. Also in September, we're going to be hosting a program called Confronting the History of Housing Discrimination. So that's coming up as well. That'll be here. There are yard signs with generic "we like housing. Housing is for everybody" messages. Feel free to take one and stick it in your lawn if you have a lawn. That would be wonderful.
I have it in my kitchen.
We have a variety of resources out there on the table and also cookies and water. But please, if you're not signed up, please do get our newsletter and we will have lots of links for you with the bylaw and the AG's comments. And we have a checklist. Do we have copies of that?
Yeah, there's copies of the checklist at the back. And then I would also encourage you guys to visit their link tree, visit their Facebook page. They put on informational meetings like this all the time. So if there's things concerning housing or even intersectional issues that you don't feel like you understand, they may have the answer up on their Facebook page or their link tree page. So you don't necessarily have to come in person every month and get the information, even though we like seeing you. There's a lot of other resources that they have to offer you guys.
And please do take, it's called the ADU process. Has links to a whole bunch of, or find it on our website. We want to thank all of you for coming.
I was just going to say, there's some other interesting things coming. We hope to have walking tours for the MBTA districts. That's coming up over the summer. We have 3 dates, and there was sign-up sheets out there on the table, so we thought we would try and take some advantage of nice weather and be able to walk and talk about some of the examples of different kinds of density and look at some of the opportunities in those districts that people are potentially very curious about.
And/or
so
drive.
We'll have those scripted walks, and we're thinking about breaking it down and having different areas of town to walk through. So if you're interested in doing that, we have some dates, some sign-up sheets back there too.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a good one.